Welcome to the show that explores the methods and strategies on rocking the financial side of your music business. With over 40 years combined experience, here are your hosts, Chris Webb and Dave Tamkin.
Welcome to Musician's Tip Jar, where we talk about musicians and money. Where we believe a good musician can handle their bills as well as they handle the blues. I'm Chris Webb, joined by my co-host, who I met when we were both very financially compatible, in that we were both broke, Dave Tamkin.
Ain't that the truth? We talk more about money than music, where I think most musician friendships start talking about the music first.
Yeah, probably. Today we examine the effect of money on relationships in this music world. We highlight the unique challenges and dynamics we face in both professional and romantic relationships as musicians and creatives. Everyone has experienced these challenges, and sometimes these issues can overwhelm us and stop our progress altogether. Today's quote comes from John Legend. "There were times I couldn't pay rent, and my partner was carrying us. It tested everything, but it also showed me what real love looks like."
She must have been pretty strong. And how far was she carrying him? This week's nonprofit is loveandmusic.org. Love and Music, founded in May 2007, in the aftermath of the 429 LA uprising. To foster cross-cultural collaboration and harmony, they are dedicated to empowering youth and undeserved communities with free music education through musically gifted volunteers. If you find this information useful, please rate and subscribe to the podcast, and also slam that like button if you're on YouTube so we can help keep you up on the finance side of your music business.
We spend so much time talking about ways to grow your music business, increase your wealth, and the many ways to just succeed. But we also try to highlight sustainability. That includes mental and physical health, happiness, and fulfillment itself. A pillar of happiness is relationship. We love to emphasize the importance of community and its power, but we haven't spent much time discussing how to navigate relationships around money. This can include spouses, business partners, family, friends, bandmates, even our audience, and the fans that we communicate with. This is a great topic that is well worth our attention. Let's go.
I came up with a few titles for this. You want to hear them?
Sure.
I hope so. I'm going to read them. Love, Rent, and Late Night Sets. Money Talk for Creative Couples. Money for Nothing, and Your Chicks for Free. Rich Girl, She Works Hard for the Money. Love Don't Cost a Thing. And there were some Puffy Combs titles that I just thought I should leave that alone altogether. This touches every relationship. Romantic, business, family, creative. It's time we really talked about it. And I'm surprised. I think we're so romantic with our loved ones, Chris. And really been pretty lucky to just enjoy the company of the musicians we get to share a stage with, that this conversation didn't come up sooner.
Yeah. Here we are, season 5, and we're still finding all these things that are huge topics that we've never really touched on. This is a big one. And so let's start with some of the stats on why it's so big, right? First of all, 1 in 5 divorces cite money issues as their primary cause. And we will not only talk about those relationships, but they really are such a pillar of our happiness. So they really are important to be addressing, especially because musicians live a very unique life, right? 31% of Americans admit to committing financial infidelity, like hiding purchases or secret accounts. The median, and I don't know why that's funny to me. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing. Median annual income for the U.S. working musicians is $21,300. That's according to the Music Industry Research Association. $21,300.
Just to go back on that last one, I know couples that have had one of the couple in the relationship actually make fake bank receipts to show us statements. And that was the first time I ever heard of that. But I thought, man, if you have so much time and you could use that power for evil, just think of how much money you could get paid if you use that power for good.
Well, and that's probably because they didn't really want to admit what's really happening, right? Which was they're in trouble financially. Another stat was that only 6% earn over 100,000 per year from music solely. 6%. That's actually more than I thought it would be, to be honest, to be making over 100K. This is all in the United States. But that number should be bigger, obviously, especially as inflation continues to erode what 100,000 can even do anymore. And the last stat I wanted to throw in here was 73% of musicians report dealing with anxiety, depression, or both. And these can have huge impacts on the relationship and the health of your relationship. So much of that anxiety and depression can come from your financial stress. So these are really important things to talk about, and we've tried to kind of narrow them down to just focusing on the stuff that maybe everyone here could really benefit from the most. So let's discuss the most common areas being a musician and choosing this career where relationships can affect ourselves and our lives around money.
One thing I want to mention before we go into these things is that we're very aware that there is someone on the opposite side dealing with the musicians in these conversations that have their own set of frustrations and things that they need to deal with us. When I brought this up with Ann last night, she's like, I might call Jack Attack and see if we could have our own episode, and we'll probably blow your numbers out of the water talking about we're supposed to, how they're supposed to handle us. How about how we handle them? So we're very aware that when we go through this, that there is someone on the other end of this that has their own set of standards that we need to show up for.
I mean, I think what we're really saying is what Taylor Swift said the best is, hey, I'm the problem, it's me, right?
Yeah, yes.
Really what we're here to do. But how you handle your problem, how yourself, is really what we're talking about here. So let's start with number one, which is how do we handle money around the irregular income and just financial planning in general? Because the reality is being a musician means your income is like your set list in that it changes almost every night. At least I hope you can let us mix it up every night. 1 month, you might flush out with festival paychecks and merch sales and all this great revenue coming from your streams. Whereas the next, you're going to be scrapping cash together from those low-paying gigs and Venmo tips and whatever else last-minute stuff you put together, like lessons. So unlike a traditional 9-to-5 job, your money here doesn't land neatly in your bank account every 2 weeks. It trickles in from all these different angles, like streaming royalties and bar gigs and teaching and sync placements. And sometimes that stuff can be often pretty unpredictable.
Now try to build a life with someone in that context. You want to plan a vacation, you want to buy a house together, have a kid, even just budget groceries without having anxiety around it. And that's when groceries is when you just moved in with each other, covering rent. And then there's that other stuff when you want to say, hey, this is someone I want to spend the rest of my life with. That's tough when your income's a roller coaster. And here's like the quiet tension. When one partner has more consistent income than the other, you might start to feel guilty, dependent, or even ashamed because you can't do what the other person is doing. And meanwhile, that partner carrying more financial weight might feel pressure, resentment, or just feel misunderstood. And no one talks about it out loud. But it's there, waiting to unleash. And when we were going through these notes, we work hard to have that open communication with our partners, and to go back to have these things like presented again. It just shows how lucky you can be if you figure this stuff out, to not have that resentment when those things happen, because over a 20-year marriage, you get into these ebbs and flows with finances.
I think the other part of this to me, and I let me preface this by saying, like, it's amazing that we as musicians can even find people willing to be with us. Because
very true.
I mean, we're such dreamers. We're, what we're trying to do is so out of the norm, right? It's so insecure for some of people's partners. And I think back to sometimes the early years. I'm saying this, I think Jacqueline, my wife, would absolutely agree with this. She didn't think there would ever be a point I would be making enough money that she didn't have to work. I
Yeah.
mean, that really was never something that she believed could actually happen. And it's not her fault. It's society has programmed us to believe that. And I've take a lot of pride in that. We've shown that that actually is possible. But also at the same time, it was always like believing that you're good enough, believing that like that you could do it together, you know, because there were plenty of years where she was the breadwinner and I was playing shows at night and I was doing all the things that like I could do around the house. And even the first 5 years of our kids, I was the primary caregiver at home because that was where I was more valuable because childcare is incredibly expensive and I could play shows at night. So we just had to make it work. And just like John Legend said, we're like the same, you know, where
Yeah.
Jacqueline was carrying me, which is also very impressive, right? The thing that I really want to say when it comes to the irregular situation is to talk about how you can plan out the budget itself. And if you know how much you're going to need, then it really takes away that whole mystery of like, how are we doing, right? That's why we always emphasize having a budget. And that means every month, right? Having a new budget, if you're going to change how much you're going to bring in, we can change the forecast and then also put that against the expenses and be able to see clearly that things are going to be okay. That understanding, that information makes such a difference in being able to both be on the same page about this is going to be okay. So that brings us to number 2, which is time away and touring with all the distance that we have to kind of sign up for. The reality is a musician isn't just a job, right? It's a lot of other things involved with it, including a traveling lifestyle often. That means late night gigs. That means weekend festivals, rehearsals that stretch past midnight if you're unlucky, tours that will pull you away for weeks and sometimes even months. And while other couples are building routines and doing daily things, you're packing gear and hitting the road again. And it's exciting for you, but what about your partner, right? It can feel like they're dating a ghost sometimes, or they're with somebody who's gone a lot. And I know there are plenty of business people that have to do this stuff often too. And I do think that it's gotten a little bit easier to make this a little bit more sustainable with traveling now and the way that people kind of approach tours. Maybe you can make some adjustments with stuff now that maybe wasn't available to us before, but it's really something that takes a toll on a relationship.
That toll, it's like a marathon. It starts out where this could be exciting. When I met Ann in March, and in April was her birthday. I flew her out to Washington, D.C. I was on the road for the next like 6 weeks. So I'm like, oh, I'm not going to let this one get away. Send her flowers. She talked about cereal she likes. So I sent her cereal. We were reading a book at the same time together and we were checking in. And then you go 4 years into the relationship, and April is a big month for me for touring. So now I'm not there all the time for the birthdays. In the beginning, I'm like, oh, let's go fly out here or fly out there. Well, now she has responsibilities that she didn't have then. So you have these situations that were exciting at first, and now they're like, oh, we're going to miss another one. And even when you're on the road, you have bad signals going through Nebraska and you can't finish conversations, or, something snowballs into a crazy conversation when you're in a van in Ohio and you can't finish because you have to load in. Even when you do have that trust, the lack of being present emotionally and physically, it can create resentment, which is a word that we're going to be saying a lot over and over.
We should bring up, when you have a family, you're not just missing out on those situations with your significant other, but also potentially your kids, which can have a much larger impact than just even the relationship with your spouse. So that's a huge factor in my life right now. And I'm making adjustments in order to make it worth it, and having conversations with my kids just to let them know that this is how our family is functioning. This isn't just for me, and I almost say that in a way that's like selfish for me to be like, I want you to know I'm flying to Seattle this weekend to play a show, but it's not just for me, right? Like I'm bringing in the income that is helping all of us do all these things that we appreciate being able to do, in our life. And I'll be back. And it's just like having those conversations and making them understand like the value that you're bringing to the family, your contribution is really important, because I think sometimes it can get lost in that, like, oh, because you're doing what you love, you must just be going out to go have fun. We'll see you. Dad's gone again, whatever. And I don't know. I just think that those kind of conversations are equally important here when we're talking about relationships, because so much of it can be misunderstood.
How do you intentionally stay close, even when you're that many miles apart?
Well, FaceTime has really helped. We didn't have that when we were kids, so I do think that those technologies have really made a difference. And so FaceTime is a big one for me, or whatever I'm doing to be able to talk face to face with them. And texting now, because my kids are old enough to have devices that I can text them, that we just send memes. I literally I send, just like what we do with our spouses, I send them things, just like things I know they're going to like that I see, or talking about sports or what.
You can say, Chris, just like the things you do with me. It's all
and
right.
I send to you too. It's funny how memes have become a way of staying connected without even talking. It's just like sharing realities or experiences or emotions, whatever the meme is about. They're ways of keeping a closeness in your understanding and experience.
And it's nice to know you're being thought of in the middle of the day, to get a little smile on your face.
Yeah.
Pro tip is create non-negotiable moments of connection. It could be a video call the day of a show in the morning, or, when you get back to your hotel. That's a little crazy sometimes when you're on the road. You never know how many schedules are going to align with that. But a shared calendar of milestones, voice memo tradition, something that builds routine. I think that has helped Ann and I throughout the years.
Another thing I was going to bring up was, nowadays too, it's easier for people to bring their families with them and their spouses to travel with them for at least part of the tour. I've been watching Wesley Schultz. He's from here in Denver, and I see that he brings his kids, and they're pretty young still. They're not really in the daytime school schedule yet, but they travel with him, and they all over the world, they travel with them, and his spouse too. And I just think that that's a really great thing that they're allowed, or they're giving them the opportunity to experience it with them. I think that probably makes a huge difference in everyone's experience together. Next one on our list is to talk about creative identity and relationship needs. The reality is, for a lot of musicians, your art isn't just what you do, it's who you are. Your identity, your purpose, your sense of worth, all that is tied to your music. The kind of passion that can be magnetic can also be overwhelming. And when you're deep in a writing session, or chasing an idea at 3 a.m., or emotionally crashing after a bad show, it's easy to unintentionally check out of your relationships or take it out on them. And when your partner doesn't fully understand that emotional highs and lows that you're coming from about trying to be this creative, that disconnect can grow between the two of you pretty fast.
When I was taking every gig I could take in Chicago, we were doing the house band at the House of Blues 3 days a week from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And then we would go do another show from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock around the city. And that would go on for 3-4 days. And then you'd have a Saturday show. I was in a relationship at that time that I came home on Sunday and I was spent. I had nothing left in the tank, and it wasn't fair. I was putting all this effort towards this stuff, but then left nothing for that Sunday to make connections. She was a musician as well, so she had shows. They were just different kind of shows, and probably I went out a lot later than I should have too, because maybe her shows ended earlier, but it was nuts. And it's like you're competing with the music and the relationship, and you're gonna lose unless you can prioritize that relationship. Another thing I think with that is, musicians go out and all night long you are validating your passion. And you're having it validated as well by people saying, "Oh, you're doing such a good job," or "Let's talk to you, like to get to know you. You did a great job here." And then you get home and there's chores that you might not have done. or your partner may not have done those chores and you need to talk about it. And now we're not talking about being that cool rock star anymore. You're coming back to reality of like, this is a life well lived if we're keeping the home base moving together. But it's really hard to look at someone that may be asking you to do something where a whole audience was just asking you to sing. And that's all they wanted. And you now have to go out and get groceries. And at that time, it was weird because you're on the road for months on end, not having to do any of that stuff. And I'm sure it was the same for her. Awesome singer, awesome dancer, awesome vote. You know what I mean? And then to come home and then to have me be like, well, what are we going to do? This or that? And she's like, I just rocked my ass off for 3 days straight. You know, maybe I need a break. Validate a relationship is partners and their worth to each other is much different than the validation you get on stage. And you have to make that switch.
There are so many times where I like come home with that rush. And not only is it hard to go to sleep, but it's like hard not to talk about it, you know? And sometimes like my wife or kids don't want to hear about it. It's just, you know, it's not like they're not being mean. It's not the stuff that they really want to talk about. And if I'm like playing a song, like the other thing is like my kids will be like, oh, Dad, you know, like, hey, I was just playing this song the other night and people were really into it, you know, like, and kids are like, oh. They kind of like get used to the reality that maybe on stage you are something that you're a totally different thing at home. And in some ways you cherish that because I mean, it is a little exhausting to be on that stage all the time. Right. And you don't really, I think of like a friend of mine from Chicago that is in a pretty successful band. And he had the same kind of things to say where it's like, you come home and it's like, for him, like after playing these massive places and then just being dad again, you have to learn how to mentally adjust to that and be okay with your ego has to be let go of because you kind of build up that ego a bit. And then you have to be back to being just what you need to be for the family.
Yeah. I remember when I first started writing songs in front of Ann, like, you know, small place in Colorado. And then she'd walk by and be like, you're not going to sing it like that, are you?
I know. Yes.
Like, wait, what?
That's its own podcast right there.
Yeah.
Because I think, we learned quickly that that's a private experience. No one wants to watch that.
Well, sometimes you have to let them into that process because that's where your intimacy is, you know, with the music. And if you want someone, I mean, maybe you let them in when you ask them, not for off the cuff comments coming from left field when you haven't dialed it in yet. But, you know, it is weird. You want to share that with someone, especially if they're a I don't want to say non-musician, loves music. Those are even worse because they know what they love. It doesn't matter what skill level they're hearing. They're just like, that sounds like crap. Fix it.
Well, and all of that is coming back to the money part. Like if you're writing these songs and your spouse or your family is watching all this money come in from that, they're going to be a lot more tolerant of it than when you're doing it. And this isn't judging them on it. It's just a fact that they're going to have a harder time sitting through all that time and dedication you're putting towards it when you're not making that money. And that is part of like finding the right spouse perhaps, but also you just have to be willing to accept that that's going to be hard on them because it takes time to build these things in this industry. And there's plenty of rejection and there's plenty of time where you're going to be struggling, right? We always say that financial struggle is a part of the process when you're building an art and you're building a business around your art. So it's just going to be a thing. And maybe that's why people stay single until after they've built up something. But I don't know if I would have ever been able to get to where I'm at if my wife wasn't able to hold us up for those many years while I did all that extra legwork and built and headed towards this.
Well, if you're listening to this right now and you're feeling seen by it, you're not alone. We've all been broke, overwhelmed, or unsure how to ask for what we need. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. And I think with what we have left, you're going to find out that honesty will always win. in these conversations about music, passion, and money.
Yeah, and relationships are so hard if you don't communicate well. So here's just a couple questions we might even recommend you ask or talk about. Are you both contributing to the relationship in ways that we recognize and respect, right? Like, are you both doing different things? It's not always about money. And how do you make sure that financial decisions feel collaborative, not controlling, right? And that really is a big part of the budget and a big part of what we talk about another area called inevitables, and putting money aside for goals, right? And those goals can be everything from recording an album to going to Bali, right, as a family. So like really these are big conversations to have. And is the financial setup something that you've both talked about? One of the things I really like about Monarch Money, the app that I use that syncs to all of our accounts, is that it has separate logins for my wife and I, so that we don't have to talk about the budget. We don't have to talk about where the budget is at this point in the month, right? We both just look at it, and it answers our questions. We don't have to have a conversation about those kind of things. We obviously talk about bigger purchases or anything like that, but we don't have to continuously stay on it together in a way that makes it feel a little bit more exhausting. And I would recommend, though, at least once a month that you check in on all of these things. So we like to look at the basics. It doesn't take long, but it's really fun when things are going well. But like taking a look at like how your net worth is moving, in your household, and how have you achieved goals and saved towards things that you're excited about, especially vacations, and prioritized things like being able to get the kids if you have kids, like those things that they want for their birthday or Christmas coming up or whatever those things are. Just checking in on those things so they don't build up, right? If they build up, they become big problems. If we can tackle them when they're kind of still just existing in a smaller space, it's a much easier way to handle them. The next topic is public image and social life and temptation. Being a musician often comes with social currency, late nights and parties and fans and flirtation and lots of situations like that. And let's be real, they don't look great from the outside. If you're posting selfies with collaborators and staying out past midnight, sometimes in these environments, and there's all these things, it can often give people the wrong impression. Sometimes that can lead to people projecting what they think on you, and that can bleed over into your family as well.
I mean, that's why people get depressed by looking at people's highlight reels. People are only presenting themselves in the way that they want to be presented when it's their own reel. But as a musician, if you're in a room with a bar and there's a bunch of beers on the bar and you're standing there, it doesn't mean you drank any of those beers.
As your spouse gets used to this occupation, some of these things get easier. Their understanding of the situations get easier, right? Their acceptance of this reality. And like I said, especially if financially it's working, it's a lot easier to get used to. But my wife is just not a jealous person anymore. And if she was, I think this would be hard, but she's not. And I maybe that wasn't the case, 15 years ago, but it is now, where she's like, whatever, like it just isn't something to have to deal with. And I really appreciate that, because it would be an exhausting thing to have to try to deal with outside of all the other things that you're trying to do to achieve this goal of being a musician for a living.
For musicians that are just starting to date people, though, I can see where one couple might think, where do I fit into all of this? And it doesn't even mean the musician's photos. It can mean the person at home with their family and at birthdays and events and with friends or on a boat, and they're on the road alone. How do I fit back into this picture? Now forgive me, I don't know the names of these two people, but it was an older gentleman who was dating a younger woman, and the older gentleman was a musician. So I walked into this conversation where she was like, yes, you should lie to me. And I stepped back. I'm like, oh, well, you're telling me you're on the road, you're doing these things, people are coming up talking to you, you've played all night, but you're putting on your best face. You're lying to them. You're saying, hey, I could go out more. I can do something, that's not comfortable for me, but I'm going to pursue my passion. And pretty much lie to yourself to keep on going. So then when you come home to me, you're saying, oh, I don't have enough energy left. No, lie to me. Say you have enough energy to go out to dinner, to show up to this relationship. And I think that the things you do for your passions, you could push yourself too far sometimes, but you're showing up in a different way where you're saying, well, because I know someone loves me, they're going to be there for me no matter what, that you can forget to put all that passion into that relationship as well. And she made such a great point that if you could lie to someone on the street and put on that smile and be, joyful and be like, oh, okay, let's go out for one more, you can do that for me too, instead of crash. And I think that's, in this kind of section, really hit home for me.
Well, that brings up the other idea to me that people can grow apart, right? And that I think happens a lot. I think people grow apart and then come back together too. I don't think it's always like you continuously grow apart. But as you get older, life is long, right? And if you're going to spend it with one person, you both are going to go to different places as you grow and as you experience life. And I think that's totally okay. But there's also that other end of it where, like, are you aligned in what you want long term still, right? That bigger question of what is it that you both want and does it still match? So I think that's another one of those worthy conversations when we're talking about this end of things. Do you both feel like you're making progress towards that goal, right? And that's that G for growth in our financial scale is really what we're talking about, because you need to always feel like you're headed somewhere. And, we're all goal oriented, right? We always want to, as musicians, want to have these goals that we're checking off as we progress. And that's how we often talk about measuring your progress. But your relationship has to have some of that too, where it's approached in that you're headed somewhere and that you're building towards things, right? Whether that's your kids' college funds or taking that retirement to that house in Hawaii, or all of those things are a part of it. And then there's going to be sacrifices that are made along the way. Some dreams are not going to come to fruition, and some situations are not going to work out the way you planned. But if that end goal is still there, I think that is a big part of it. And when things go downhill financially, having that end goal still be there is really, really critical in order to help hold you and all of this together.
I would say the pro tip on this one would be to go to that lovely app where you share all your tattoo pictures with each other and you do a vision board with Pinterest. I know I haven't showed it to you yet, Chris, because I'm not sure you're ready to see what kind of tattoos Ann and I have or want. So it's not just for your career, but for your life as a couple. It's fun to dream and do these things together. Set your goals, connect, support one another. It's easier to stay in sync when you have something visual sometimes. And even when the line or the path, the journey it's not straight. You have something to kind of turn back to. If you have nothing else, you just go back to the tattoos.
I think with a home, like our next home, we kind of we created a vision board with just like things that we envision it having. Sometimes get lost when it comes to like what the heck I'm doing. I like to look back at that for myself just to remember like where I'm trying to take all of this, because I just don't know, like there's got to be more, right? Eventually, like even a song will lose its meaning to you or lose its magic because you've played it enough, even if it's a song that when you wrote it like changed your life, right? And sometimes we just need to be able to remember the bigger picture. So let's go to our next one, which is collaboration versus competition. And this is mostly targeted towards creative couples, but everybody is creative. So the truth to me is like every couple is a creative couple.
And creative friends, in the same business. I mean,
totally.
How many singer-songwriter friends do we have that we want to lift them up?
Yeah, and if you're in a band or if you co-write or if you have coworkers at your teaching gig, all of these things are going to become a feeling that you have to kind of address in your relationship. Like, are we collaborating or are we competing for things? And sometimes you really are competing for something. Like, there's only one guitar spot on this band and you're both auditioning, but that's not really what we're talking about here. We're more like talking about how both people in the relationship can be creatives, even if it's a friendship, especially for musicians, this thing can be beautifully complicated. On one hand, you're speaking the same language, you're motivating each other, and you're giving each other that kind of oomph, that kind of kick to keep things going. But then at the same time, you're feeling perhaps a little bit of competition to where that can be negative, or it can feel like it's taking a negative toll on your relationship.
I mean, when you're ever going to compete with someone to get that slot in a band, you just make sure that other person never makes it to that audition, right? Little shiv in the tire, get there early. Where is this guy? He's going to be late like this all the time if you hire him. There's ways around that, Chris. Well, one person is getting more attention, like more gigs, more recognition. It's hard not to compare that. You just feel it. And you want to feel happy for your partner, your friend. But there's also, I think, it's easy to feel left behind or inadequate in some way. And on the flip side, creative critiques can accidentally turn into, I don't know, something that you didn't even want to hear if you're not even asking for that kind of feedback. But I think in the long run, if you show up to these relationships wanting to build them up, all that other stuff goes away, very quickly. The key isn't just chemistry, it's communication, it's clear boundaries. And I don't think since I left Chicago and went to Colorado, I've never had that feeling of competition not being done in a healthy way with the people that I've met. And I think you learn to have those boundaries. And you also grow up in a way where, how many people come to a show isn't your show compared to someone else's show. It doesn't define anything. You're on your own journey. Concentrate on that and be happy for their journey. I think that's where happiness is.
If we are allowing that feeling in, it's our own fault in my mind. And I'm not saying that, I'm not telling somebody that, I am saying it's your fault, actually. Because I mean, it's a lesson you learn, right? You can't control, just the same as much as you can't control how someone else is feeling about the situation. You can't change their mind. You can't tell them to feel that or not to feel that, right? But at the same time, you are in charge of working through whatever it is you're feeling. And we're so threatened by other people doing well. Usually, like we've said before, I know on the show, that's an indication that it's something that you want, right? That's why you're feeling jealous, right? But you should say, okay, I'm around people that are doing what it is that I want to be doing. This is a good sign, right? And in a relationship, it could also just be that your spouse might be jealous that you're out living life doing what it is for yourself that you set out to do successfully, and they may feel like they're not getting to do what they need to do. So there's that end of it, which is very valid to address and to make sure that everyone feels like they have the resources and the time in that relationship to do and pursue what it is that they feel like they need to be doing. So that part of it is valid, but whether you're jealous of somebody else is an internal issue.
We talked about you're most like the 5 people that you hang out with. So they better be kicking ass. You want to be around people that are succeeding. And that goes same with family. You want to be around the family members that are smiling, going after their goals, lifting each other up and you up so you could do that to them in return.
Well, and so much of what our kids learn, this should probably be a whole separate episode, is like how musicians don't fuck up their kids. It should be its own episode. But they learn so much about how we handle relationship issues, right? They're all watching us all the time. And they're watching and listening to us about money, right? And they're learning everything that you and I have learned about money, even if it's subconscious, was a lot from our childhood, and those moments that maybe stick out as being defining moments of what you understand money is and what it does. So having conversations about money is really important. So I added a last one on here about what relationships you have with money, like yourself. Like, what is it that you do with money and whether or not you have a good relationship with money is a really important thing. And I want to actually save this for another podcast too, because I think it's a huge topic. But I just kind of wanted to put in your head that if you don't have a good relationship with money, you're likely to struggle with that relationship with your spouse and money. You're likely to struggle with your kids and money. And your kids are likely to struggle with their understanding of money. And your bandmates and you are probably going to have an issue managing money if you don't have a good relationship with money. So when you think about spending money, do you feel good, right? Or does it give you anxiety? Like when someone buys you a coffee, can you do that without feeling guilty? Like all of those things are indicators about how you feel about money itself. And so whatever your relationship is with money, it's worth spending some time thinking about. And like I said, we'll dedicate another podcast to this probably next season about how you should spend some time with this. But for now, I just kind of wanted to put this in here because I think everything else stems out of whatever's in your head. And your relationships are either successful or not based on your own ability with yourself and your relationship with yourself and your own money situation. So to sum all this up, what it all kind of comes down to is being a musician isn't just a career, it's a lifestyle, it's a calling, and sometimes it's a full-blown identity crisis. And when you mix that with love and partnership and sharing goals, there's a lot involved in keeping things in healthy communication. So it's no surprise that money can become one of the trickiest parts of relationships in all of this, in this equation. So whether it's irregular income or the pressures of making a plan, right? Or long nights and long distance and the gaps, or this creative identity clashing that can happen in relationships and that emotional reaction to that, or the public lifestyle testing, those boundaries and your trust, or misaligned timelines and your dreams, or if your relationship with money in itself is not healthy, all of this is going to affect your ability to succeed and actually be happy with your life. So the truth is, none of this resolves itself on its own.
You've got to talk about it honestly, repeatedly, and with compassion. Stability versus freedom, ego versus empathy, passion versus partnership, and artistic ambition versus relational accountability. So, and we're here to say you can have both, but only if you're willing to show up with radical honesty with your partner, your bandmates, and as Chris, said, the number 8 for yourself.
And so for your action step, we're going to have you pick one uncomfortable conversation, something that you've been avoiding about money, about expectations or your needs or anything around that area of money in your relationship, and go and have that conversation this week. It could be with a coworker, it could be with a bandmate or a business partner, or it could be with your spouse, and it also could be with your kids or your parents. We didn't even talk about how your parents screwed you up.
That's a whole nother episode.
Season 6 has got a lot going on. And don't have this conversation out of frustration, right? This is about letting go and growing, right? These are important parts about building your happiness and your sustainability. So come from a place of curiosity and love with this. It might feel awkward. It will feel awkward. But it's the only way to build something that lasts. We know that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending this time with us and being a part of this community. It's our hope that you feel that sense of community here at Musicians Tip Jar, and that you'll help spread the word to make us all stronger. If you'd like to get a hold of us, what's the best way to do that?
Check out musicianstipjar.com for tools, resources, and discounts built specifically to help keep you up on the finance side of your music business. And reach out to us anytime at musicianstipjar@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your story. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend, leave a review, or hit the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. It helps us grow this community and supports more musicians like you.
As always, thank you for joining us. Remember, there is already enough for everyone. You just need to know how to get it. Until next time, on behalf of Dave Tamkin and myself, Chris Webb, stay happy, healthy, and wealthy. Love is free. Music costs everything. Touring costs even more. But being understanding and understood with people you care about, that's priceless. This is Musician's Tip Jar.
Oh Lord, I could use somebody. I could use somebody. I could use somebody.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, business, or financial professional for individualized advice. Individual results are not guaranteed, and all discussed strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The hosts are operating on behalf of Musician's Tip Jar, LLC exclusively.
Could use a little help there. Could use some help. Could use a little help there.